Hello, this is As the World Burns with Randall Burns. It is May 11th, 2021. I'm recording this in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest, and I'm actually near a reservoir. You may be able to hear the waterfall in the background. Today's topic is the novel Looking Backward by Edward Bellamy. Now, Looking Backward was one of the four most popular books of the 19th century in America. The others included Uncle Tom's Cabin, the novel Ben-Hur, and Progress and Poverty by Henry George, which was a nonfiction book. The other two were fiction. What makes Looking Backward important is not its great literature or its enduring popularity, but its influence. If you want to understand the world you live in, understanding Looking Backward, there's some real merit to that. There are few books that come up with any new ideas that take off and become incorporated into the broader culture. There are several in Looking Backward. One of them is debit cards. It's the first mention anywhere in the literature of anything like debit cards. Another one is warehouse clubs. Bellamy describes something very similar to warehouse clubs. Now, this is done in the context of it's a novel set in the 1960s in America, which are 100 years after the novel was written. And it's basically the idea is that somebody hibernated for many, many years and then wakes up in the modern America. And how is this different? Well, one is that there's a planned economy and people work for 10, 15 years in an industrial army and then they retire, kind of like people do from the US Army, except it's even broader. Another one is that the major corporations are run by the government. Okay, now Bellamy was not a Marxist. He was a Christian socialist, something that's kind of gone away in modern America. But this shows you. But the thing is, the Bellamy advocates were an important part of Norman Thomas's and Eugene Debs' Socialist Party. They were part of the alliance. They were a part that had to be dealt with to make that coalition work. And in fact, if you want to understand modern American politics, there were very intentional wedges put between religious moral conservatives and secular leftists. And I think that was done quite intentionally and quite strategically. Okay. And there's another story there. Okay. But a lot of Bellamy's ideas will seem kind of quaint today. At the time, the problems with a centrally planned economy were not obvious. Henry George, by the way, understood them. But they weren't broadly understood at the time. I mean, even the people that opposed Marx actually thought that his ideas might actually work out. George was not one of them. But and Marx was not the originator of the idea of a centrally planned economy. He was the person who gave it academic support and brought it into the mainstream in academia. But he was not the originator of it. There were a lot of other people planning along these lines. And the problems were not obvious. So you have to kind of cut Bellamy some slack on that one. Now, his scheme is sometimes called a universal basic income. I think it's more like a universal civil service pension system. And this is something that the United States went pretty far with in the 1950s. So it really, it wasn't that far-fetched. It hadn't come to pass by 1960, but it wasn't that far-fetched to think that the United States was moving in this direction. Turned out, this was reversed, in the 80s with the Reagan Revolution. And it actually started the reverse before that. But, the problems with running a economy through the government were just much larger than anybody anticipated. But Bellamy's dream is one of a leisure society where most people don't have to work very hard. Now, he made assumptions on that one about the culture that did not really turn out to come to pass. And, he had the assumption, he did talk about something close to mass media. He thought that mass media would be dominated by sermons and classical music concerts. That is not what has happened. Anyhow, this is Randall Burns signing off. Thank you very much for joining me.